So we always start out with our motivation, because from a Buddhist perspective, our motivation is the most important element in what we do. Yeah, it's not what we do, it's why we do it. And so, because of that, you know, we're really asked to get to know ourselves and to develop a kind of honesty with ourselves and a kind of transparency where we can be aware of what our motivation is, admit what it is, or, you know, verbalize it when need be, and also learn how to transform it and expand it so that we can, you know, deliberately cultivate a really broad motivation that can benefit ourselves and others. Okay? And our motivation is very often something that we're not terribly aware of in our day-to-day life. Because in our daily life, we're much more focused on what we're doing and what other people are going to think about what we're doing. Don't you think so? Do you focus a lot on, you know, oh, I'm doing this, what are other people going to say about it? Are they going to approve? Are they not going to approve? Are they going to, you know, criticize me? What's happening? So we're very outward focused. Yeah? And we need to become more inward focused so we can get in touch with ourselves and see what's going on inside of ourselves. Yeah. And really figure out what our motivation is. Because very often we say things, we do things, we have no clue why we're doing them. Yeah? Or sometimes it's years later, we look back on an incident and we say, why was I involved in that? And then we look at our motivation from years ago and we go, oh, no wonder that didn't turn out so well. Okay? So we're really trying to develop that introspective awareness. Yeah, hey, you want to come up here? You want to come up here? Come on. Yeah, and everybody will look at you. Yeah, look. Isn't that nice?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that's fun. Mom's not going anywhere. The microphone's making a lot of noise. Can you see Omari Pele home? You heard Omari Pele home? Omari Pele home, Omari Pele home, Huh? Yeah, wave. Wave. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. I'm going to keep you all awake so you don't doze off during the talk. Yeah? Okay. Yeah. I gave some years ago, I was in Missoula giving some talks, and there was a baby in the audience there, and the only way I could get people to pay attention to me was to hold the baby. Because otherwise they were just totally focused on the baby. Okay. So, I think we're supposed to talk tonight something about courageous compassion, something along that line, isn't it? Yes. We were looking for the title of the talk beforehand. We couldn't find the flyer. So, so if anybody remembers anything different as the topic, please tell me.
No, that was it. That was it.
The courageous compassion. Okay. Because I think it's, you know, the book that you'll see out there called Living with an Open Heart. It came out last year, and I wrote it together with a psychologist from Eastern Washington U. And one thought we wanted to have for the title was Courageous Compassion. Of course, the book publisher, they said, no, we want to have this other title, so we had to go along with their title. But both Russell Coates, my co-author, and I really like the idea of courageous compassion, because both of us feel, from a psychological view and from a Buddhist view, that being compassionate requires a great deal of courage. People often think of compassion as something wimpy, and something soft, something where you cave in, where you don't stick up for yourself, you become the world's doormat. Often people think of compassion in that way. But neither Russell nor I think of compassion as something wimpy, because actually I think it takes an incredible inner strength to be compassionate in situations. And it doesn't take nearly as much strength to be violent and to be angry. Yeah? I mean, getting violent, being angry, beating somebody up, people just kind of do that. They just do it. But to really sit back and cultivate compassion and to try and work for the benefit of others in a difficult situation, that requires much more courage than fighting. And I remember His Holiness Dalai Lama some years ago saying that war is old-fashioned. Yeah? I'm waiting for people to realize that. That war is old-fashioned. Violence is old-fashioned. Yeah? Compassion is what is so much needed. Okay, so what is compassion? From a Buddhist viewpoint, it means wanting somebody not to suffer. Okay? And it sounds very good. We don't want anybody to suffer. Come back soon. We don't want anybody to suffer as long as they're nice to us. Yeah. As soon as somebody's not nice to us, well, it's okay if they have some suffering. Sometimes it's more than okay. We really even wish them on it. Like, go to hell. So that's not a very compassionate attitude, but it's one that people often have. But in those kinds of situations, to want somebody to have happiness and the causes of happiness is much more difficult. Yeah? It takes much more self-restraint and mental control to subdue our anger and our tendency towards cruelty and violence. But the question comes of, well, why should I be compassionate to others? Yeah? Give me a good reason for being compassionate, because we always need reasons for things. Yeah? So one might say, well, we all were brought up with the idea that compassion is a good thing. I think just saying that isn't good enough to really convince us why, what the need is for compassion. Yeah. But if we look at our own experience and we see, that if we don't have compassion and instead we have its opposite, anger, rebelliousness, wrath, and it comes out in our speech in terms of harsh words, talking behind people's back. It comes out in our actions. We be physically violent. Okay. Are we happy? when there's anger in the mind, and that anger comes out in our body and our speech, are we happy? Anybody happy here when they're angry? Are you happy when you throw something at somebody? Are you happy when you tell them off? No. We may feel powerful for a minute, but that feeling powerful for a minute is very different than feeling happy. Okay. So, if nobody is happy when they're angry, then that seems like a good reason to practice the opposite of anger, which would be compassion. Yeah. Because when we have compassion and we wish others well, then our own mind can be peaceful. And there's more of an inner sense of stillness in our own mind when there's compassion. Okay, so that's one reason why compassion actually is good for us, isn't it? Also, if we're compassionate, then we reach out and we connect with the people around us. Okay? Are you happier when you're connected with other people or when you're alienated from other people? Yeah, it's clear. We feel much happier, you know, when we have friendship, when we can connect with other people. So compassion helps us have empathy, it helps us connect, it helps us to reach out. So it brings with it automatically some sense of familiarity with others, or connection is really the best word, I think. Yeah, feeling connected with others. Also, so that's another reason, you know, for being compassionate. The third one is when we're compassionate, we reach out and we help others. Okay? When we help the people who live around us, then we're surrounded by happier people. When we don't help the people who live around us, then maybe they're happy, maybe they're not. When we're angry at the people around us, then they're unhappy. Okay. When you live with people who are unhappy, how does that affect you? Do you like living with people who are unhappy? Is it pleasant? It's awful, isn't it? It's downright awful to live with people who are unhappy. When we have compassion in our mind and we reach out because we wish others happiness, we don't want to see them suffer, then the people around us are going to be happier. That is going to have a positive impact on us. Yeah. Because when we are completely self-centered and just thinking of our own benefit, we may do things that will benefit ourselves in the short term, but in the long term, because those same actions harm others, then we wind up sabotaging our own happiness in the long term, because we wind up living surrounded by people who are unhappy. And that's a real drag, isn't it? Yeah. It's awful to live around people who are unhappy. But it's interesting for us to look sometimes, and if the people around us are unhappy, to ask ourselves, am I playing any role in being the cause of their unhappiness? Yeah. So sometimes, you know, when we don't have such a good motivation and our self-concern has been quite blown up out of proportion, then we do and say things that we think are going to better ourselves. They harm others, and thus, as a result, we wound up living with people who are unhappy. Okay, just think of the most recent fight you had in your family. Yeah? Yeah. When we say things to people motivated by anger, we're often, we're quite reckless in what we say. And we say things that are really hurtful to others. And then, of course, when we hurt others' feelings, they retaliate. And then we feel worse. And then we blame them more. And we wonder why, you know, when we're giving them such good advice about how they need to live their life and how they need to change, why they aren't taking it, why they aren't listening to our advice, why they're doing the exact opposite. We can't understand that, so we give our advice to them again, as they apparently have short-term memory. And sometimes they're hard of hearing, so we say it a little bit louder. Yeah, in case they didn't hear it the first time. Okay. We add some new inflection in it, yeah, to spice it up a little bit in case they're falling asleep. And then we wonder afterwards why those people don't want to be around us. Yeah? And why is so-and-so so mad at me? But we don't look at our behavior and how, you know, what we did to participate in, you know, somebody else's being unhappy. And of course, you know, if we were nearby and contributed to their unhappiness, it's not like they're going to come and want to be around us all the time. Okay? But it's so strange how we sentient beings are. And even our national policy, I comment on this every talk I come here, you know, our national policy is we're going to bomb you until you decide to do things our way. And we're going to bomb you until you decide that you love us. Does that work? Yeah, does that work? If people bomb you, are you going to love them in return? Okay. So even if we don't bomb people with physical bombs, this is a big bomb. Yeah? Sometimes what we say is like just incredible, yeah, to other people. And then again, we wonder why they don't want to be around us. And it's because we've used our speech as a weapon of mass destruction. Really, we do, don't we? I mean, we can destroy people's entire lives by what we say. Yeah, quite sad. You know, when I was a little kid, I didn't get hit very often, once in a while. But I was disciplined by getting screamed at. And at one time I said to my parents, please hit me, just stop screaming. Yeah. So this whole thing of, you know, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me, it ain't true. Yeah, not true at all. Yeah. Words can hurt very badly. So to have some kind of self-reflection and see, well, how am I speaking? And what's my motivation for speaking? What's the effect of the words that I'm saying? Is the effect of what I'm saying what I want to be the effect of what I'm saying? Or is what I'm saying bringing about the exact opposite result. Because sometimes when we're angry, the things we say bring about the opposite result of what we want. Very often when we're angry, especially if it's at a family member or a close friend, what we're really wanting is to connect with that person. Yeah, and we feel frustrated. We don't know how to connect because somehow we're missing each other. So we, yeah. And then how do people respond? When you walk in the door and there's, you know, that doesn't bring you close to somebody. So, you know, we have to sometimes ask ourselves, is what I'm, you know, the actions I'm taking to accomplish a goal, really accomplishing that goal? Or am I often accomplishing the opposite goal? Actually, it's not a goal, you know, accomplishing the opposite effect. Okay. So you often hear that expression that somebody's won the battle but lost the war. Yeah. So especially, you know, in our interpersonal relationships, we can push and push until we get our way, and then go, ah, I got my way. But, in fact, it often winds up meaning that the relationship degenerates afterwards. Because we've pushed and pushed to such an extent that the other person does not trust us anymore. Yeah. They don't trust that we have their best welfare, you know, in mind. And that's kind of got to be the basis of friendship, doesn't it? You know, that we're thinking about others' best welfare, not just our own welfare. Okay? So, compassion is really something that brings about, it can bring about peace and harmony, and it can avoid a lot of problems too. Another reason to be compassionate is that compassion helps us with issues of low self-esteem. Now you're going to say, what? How does compassion help me overcome low self-esteem? Because I've got to love myself before I can love others. Have compassion for myself before I can have compassion for others. So how does compassion for others help me overcome the self-loathing that is behind my low self-esteem? So I remember some years ago being at a conference where His Holiness the Dalai Lama, you know, was made aware of the kind of self-esteem problems that people have in the West. And he was so shocked, so amazed about it, you know, that people who have wealth and were successful can have self-esteem problems. And I noticed he really took that to heart, you know. And I noticed after that he started talking about compassion as a remedy to low self-esteem. And I had that question very strong in my mind. Well, how can that work as an antidote to low self-esteem? And I began to look and see that when I am concerned with the welfare of others, yeah, because compassion is directed primarily at the welfare of others, when I'm focused on what's happening in others' lives, then I don't pay so much attention to myself in an unhealthy way. And paying attention to myself in an unhealthy way is the setup for low self-esteem. Okay, so what is an unhealthy way of paying attention to myself? Okay, it's when I'm always thinking, what do other people think about me? How do I look? Do I fit in? Don't I fit in? Do they approve of what I'm doing? Oh, maybe they don't. Yeah. Do they like me? Or am I too weird for them? Yeah. So all of this self-reflection that is basic worry and anxiety and trying to it's attachment to praise and attachment to approval from other people, and then having a lot of anxiety and fear and worry about not getting it. And how that is a very unhealthy way to pay attention to ourselves. Because all we do is spin around, me. Yeah, she agrees. Yeah. Babies have a way of really affirming points in Dharma talk. Yeah. And so this way of always, interpreting everything in terms of how does it affect me? What do other people think about me? Do I fit in? That kind of self-focus is not a very healthy way of relating to ourselves. And it makes us extremely prickly. And it breeds that kind of low self-esteem because we become very, very critical about ourselves. Oh, the people at the party didn't smile, a big smile at me like they did last time. So that means that maybe I'm not accepted. It's like there could be 1,002 reasons why they smile differently now than before, but we interpret it to mean something negative about ourselves. And then we worry about it, and then we get depressed about it, and we just get completely self-absorbed. Yeah? So when we focus on others with a mind of compassion, then there's no space and no time to have that very unhealthy kind of self-focus. Are you getting what I'm saying? Yeah? And so, I thought, okay, that's why the Dalai Lama is really emphasizing compassion as an antidote to low self-esteem. I think that's one reason, simply because our attention is directed towards others and their situation, so we don't pay attention in a negative way to ourselves. Also, when we look at others and their situations, so often we appreciate our own lives more, don't we? It's like, wow, look at the problems this person has, and whoo, that's pretty heavy duty. I have my own set of problems, but at least I don't have that one. Yeah. And then also, it brings out in us the compassionate wish to extend ourselves and to be of benefit to somebody else. And when we are, then we feel good about ourselves. Yeah. When we are very self-centered, we really don't feel so good about ourselves. And this is what's very strange about our society nowadays, because we are all encouraged to be more and more self-centered. Yeah, we're taught that being self-centered, just take care of yourself, get the best for yourself. You've got to get ahead. You know, you've got to do better than somebody else. You've got to win the game, get the promotion. You've got to have more money than the other person. That all this kind of stuff that we're getting about, you know, be selfish and get ahead, that actually that attitude doesn't bring us happiness, even though society tells us it's going to bring us happiness. It actually brings us more anxiety and more feelings of separateness from other people. Yeah. Whereas in society, if we were conditioned, yeah, reach out and benefit others, yeah, extend a kind hand, then I think we would feel much happier, just even on a day-to-day basis, because people feel good when they're kind. Yeah. What was that thing I read about in one of the drive-by places recently? They had like over 400 people who paid for the person behind them. Yeah. So all those people felt really good about paying for the person behind them, even if the person behind them ordered more than they ordered, because it was just nice, you know, as they say, to do random acts of kindness. You feel good about yourself. Okay. And I think also talking about the value of compassion and courageous compassion, you know, and feeling good about yourself. You know, on today, the day when they announced the Nobel Peace Prize for the year, you know, that fits in so well. I couldn't think of a better topic for this evening's talk. Okay? And you look at the two people who are sharing the Nobel Peace Prize, who were speaking out for children and children's right and children, you know, being able to have an education and not being trafficked, you know, not being taken advantage of, not, you know, being locked in their house because they're little girls. But people, you know, the two people, you know, Malala, who I'm sure most people are familiar with, and then the Indian man, Kailash Satyarthi, I think I said it right. So, you know, both of them, what was motivating them to do what they did? It wasn't self-concern, was it? It was compassion, reaching out to be of benefit to others. If they had both just been concerned with themselves, neither of them would have won the Nobel Peace Prize. But then you see, and I was listened, I didn't hear Malala's acceptance thing, but I heard the other man, Kailash's one. And I was very impressed, you know, because he said, this prize is not for me. This prize is for all the children who want to get an education, who want to be treated properly. This prize is for all the people who work for children's rights and against trafficking throughout the world. He said, even people who I don't know. This prize is not for me, it's for all these people who are working, you know, to benefit others and to make sure that, you know, we take care of the younger generation for a happy and healthy future. And they were both happy. I think much happier than people who are always thinking about themselves and are swindling people out of money. Yeah. What do you think? Yeah? Do you think some of these CEOs who are, you know, really trying to get the last buck and make it big, do you think they're really happy inside their own hearts? Yeah, they have a lot of money. They can do what they want with their money. But that's quite different than feeling happy and feeling good about yourself. So I think compassion is very important in this way, as something that benefits us. That's why His Holiness always says, if you want to be compassionate, be wisely compassionate. I know he says, if you want to be selfish, be wisely selfish and take care of others. Okay, so it does make a lot of sense. So, caring for others does not mean being a people pleaser, okay? Compassion does not mean giving everybody everything they want. Compassion does not mean saying yes to whatever somebody comes to you for, okay? To be really compassionate, we have to have a lot of wisdom and be able to discern what is for somebody else's benefit in the long term, and what is going to help, what is going to make somebody unhappy in the long term. Okay? So we don't, assess whether to do something or not dependent on the short-term happiness of another individual. Yeah. Because often people want things that are not good for them, and they're happy about it in the short term, but it leads to a mess in their life in the long term. Okay? How many of you have kids? Yeah, a lot of you, okay? So any parent knows that you cannot say yes to everything your kid wants. Yeah? That very often, the most compassionate thing to do for your child is to say no. Yeah, that is not acceptable. You cannot do that. Here's why. And don't try and talk me into doing the opposite, because I'm not open for that. Okay? Because you know that if you don't discipline your kids, and if you don't teach them how to manage the frustration of not getting everything they want, that your kids are going to have a very difficult time living with other people in society, because they're going to think, that the world centers around them and everybody should give them everything they want, and if they don't give it, they're deserving and entitled to take it. And we all know that you can't live with other people with that kind of attitude, because sooner or later you're going to get in pretty big trouble. Okay? So many times the most compassionate thing to do to somebody else, especially like with children, is you have to say no and stick by it and explain to the child why. Even if the child gets mad at you, calls you names, slams the door, yeah? And so that's why, to be compassionate, sometimes you need a lot of courage. Because sometimes it would just be like, you're driving me crazy, okay, I'll let you have that. Just like, be quiet, I'll give it to you. But that isn't compassion. That's, making your child into a spoiled brat, which is going to be damaging to the kid. Okay? So saying, knowing when to say yes, when to say no, yeah, and being clear about that is an important thing in being kind and compassionate to kids. What do you think? I see sometimes parents trying to be their children's friends, you know, and they ask their children for permission to do things. Yeah. We're going to go out in the car now, Johnny. Is that okay with you? Yeah. We're going to go out to eat, Johnny. What kind of restaurant do you want to go to? You know? It's like the parents are treating their kids like, you know, the kids are the bosses of the family. Which in many families they are. The kids run the whole show. And they are very skilled at doing it. Oh, so skilled. Yeah. So skilled. I was on an airplane flight once, and there were two kids that were traveling alone. They didn't know each other, but they were seated near each other. And they were, you know, they got a little bit too loud, and the flight attendant had to come over and say, cool it, chill it out, kids, you know. But they had a good time, basically, and they got quieted down. And then when the flight landed, you know, one of the parents picked up one of the kids, and I was walking out, you know, close to them, and I could hear the kid whining. I want this. The flight wasn't so nice, and I want that. Why can't we have this? And I thought, oh, that kid is smart. You know, she knew how to, you know, work her mom or dad to get what she wanted, you know, but it was awful behavior. Yeah. And, you know, I thought, boy, I hope the parent can really, you know, be clear and firm in response. Otherwise, that kid is going to grow up to be an adult that is not going to be able to function together with other people and have good relationships. Yeah? Yeah, so compassion takes a lot of courage. Okay? I mean, both of the Nobel Peace Prize winners, I think, showed a lot of courage in their work. You know, well, Malala, you know, we know got shot at. And I'm sure there's, now that she's won the prize, that, you know, the Taliban is even more eager to silence her. And Kailash Satyarthi, I think, you know, also in India, it's difficult to speak out against child labor. It's a difficult issue. I've lived in India, and it's very difficult because some families are so poor that they want their children to go work because that's the only source of income that the family has. And I've lived in communities in India where they will send the young children to work in restaurants. The kids are maybe 11, 12 years old, sometimes 10, and they start working in restaurants, and they live with the restaurant owners. And then whatever little money they get, they send it back to their parents in the village. And that helps to feed the family. Yeah. So it's a very difficult issue, you know, when you say no child labor, because it's affecting the whole family. It's not an easy issue. Yeah. And so for him to really speak out about, you know, not just we're going to stop child labor, but we have to build schools. We're not just taking people out of jobs, we're putting the kids in schools so that, you know, they can have an education. So that's the real way to help them. But to do that, you really have to help the entire family. Otherwise, you know, in many cases in these poor societies, the family has no income besides what the kids bring in. Yeah. It's really pretty sad. And I don't think kids in America ever think about that. I've always thought, you know, American kids, or young adults or whatever, should spend at least 3 months in a third world country and live there and see what it's like. And I think a lot of problems in this country would be solved by people having that kind of experience. Yeah. Okay, so that's a little bit about compassion, courageous compassion. What I'd like to do now is open it up and have some discussion. And you can raise questions or express maybe some of your viewpoints. Yeah.
On the topic of exuding compassion.
Of what compassion?
Exuding compassion.
Exuding compassion.
Acting with kindness.
Yeah.
The challenge for me is to be persistent. In situations where you have a family member or a roommate who has a constant pessimistic attitude, and you want to reach out to them, and you feel like that they shut you down. So what are your methods for being persistent to consistency?
Okay, so this is a good question. You want to be compassionate. There's somebody who has a very negative attitude, and you find that although you're trying to reach out to that person, they're just going like this and kind of building a wall in some way. And so you feel frustrated?
Not so frustrated, just I feel their pain becomes my pain.
Okay, so you're feeling their pain is your pain. Okay, this is something to be careful of, okay? Some people talk about compassion in an etymological way, saying it means to feel along with somebody. I think we have to be quite aware. We feel along with them in the sense of we know what it's like to feel pain, and we don't wish them to have pain, but we don't feel along with them in the sense of their pain becomes my pain, so now I start to feel depressed and lose my energy and get discouraged. Okay, because when that's happened, it's a slippery slope. You start out with compassion, but you wind up in personal distress. Okay, so personal distress is when we can't bear to see them suffering, or another kind of personal distress is when we take responsibility for their pain and say, I have to fix their situation. I have to get them out of their pain. Their pain is, their unhappiness is my responsibility. Okay? That is when we're already sliding down the slippery slope. Okay? We really have to distinguish, their pain, their attitude, their unhappiness is their responsibility. Yeah? We are not responsible for other people's feelings because we cannot control their feelings. Okay? We are responsible for our behavior. And so, of course, if we do something nasty with the motivation to harm and somebody's upset, we're not responsible for their being upset, but we are responsible for our really, detrimental action. Yeah. So sometimes, I've got to stop talking so loud. When I can't hear the mic so well, I think that nobody else hears it. So let me see. Sorry, I have to regulate my voice a little bit. Okay, so when we think we're responsible for other people's feelings, that's not correct. We're responsible for our actions, okay? So helping somebody who is unhappy actually requires a lot of acceptance. Yeah, we have to accept that this is what the situation is, this is what they're feeling, and so on. We can look at it and diagnose it beautifully and tell them exactly what they need to do to change their bad mood. And they don't want to do it. Or they can't hear it at that particular time. Or they're nervous or whatever. And we have to accept that. Yeah, it's like, okay, this is what this person is. This is what they're capable of accepting at this moment. I can't force anything on them. Yeah. So, yeah, my job then is to keep the door open, because someday their mind may change. They may become more receptive. I don't want to be angry and shut them out totally. So I want to keep the door open. Maybe someday, you know, they'll come and I can be of benefit. Yeah. And in the meantime, there's all the other people who I can directly benefit and want to accept what I have to offer. So rather than just staying, you know, oh, I'm trying to help so-and-so and they're not listening and their life is a mess, and that's making my life a mess, and on and on and on. It's like, I accept where that person is right now. I wish they weren't there, but I can't control them. But then, here's other people where I really can be of benefit. And so I will reach out to the other people and keep the door open. Yeah? So that kind of acceptance, it can be a challenge because, yeah, we do take other people's feelings and think that they're our responsibility, or do we want to be Mr. or Ms. Fix-It? Yeah. Do you ever find yourself wanting to be Mr. or Ms. Fix-It? You have a problem? Good, do this, 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 this. Shouldn't. And meanwhile, the other person's going, you know? Because often, what people want is not advice. They just want somebody to listen. Yeah, they want somebody to understand. They don't want somebody to fix it for them. On the other hand, some people so badly, we get confused and they start talking and we think, oh, they want understanding. And so then 5 hours later, we're still there listening, giving understanding. They've repeated the story for the 10th time. You know, that clearly isn't being understanding. It's clearly not beneficial. Those are the people I call the yes but people. Okay? They tell you your problem, you offer some empathy, or they say, what do I do? And you offer some advice. And their response is, yes, but, and then they go on. And then there's a pause, and you say, oh, I understand, and maybe you can do this. Yes, but. And then, you know, you finally catch on that actually, they basically would just want to talk. They don't really want to change. They make it sound like they want to change, but they don't really want to change. So, you know, then what I do is I say, what ideas do you have for working with your situation? You're an intelligent individual. What ideas do you have? And then they'll say, well, I would really like somebody else to do da-da-da. I say, no, that's talking about what somebody else needs to do. What ideas do you have for dealing with your situation? Yeah. What is your power? How can you change yourself? So sometimes I'm able to catch this thing after the first yes but. Sometimes, you know, I'm slow. Yeah. But whenever I see that I'm getting restless listening to somebody, it's indicative to me that, you know, I'm not really handling the situation with wisdom and skill. Yeah. That I somehow have to turn it and really respect the other person and say, what ideas do you have? Yeah. Tell me your thoughts about this. Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you do if you do live in a house with somebody who's unhappy and you accept their unhappiness?
Yeah, you go about living your life. You do what you need to do.
And you don't get affected by them?
Well, you try your best not to. Yeah. You try your best not to be affected by them. Sometimes you have to say, you know, I feel really upset, really sad now, or I feel really upset, and I have some needs too that need to be met. Yes, I recognize you're unhappy, but I also have some needs in the situation. And, you know, the way you're expressing your unhappiness is difficult for me. Would you consider, and then, you know, give them some suggestions maybe about how they could change their behavior. Yeah. You can be, it's your total right to be unhappy if you want to be unhappy, but the behavior, you know, affects me adversely. And so could you, you know, consider doing X, Y, and Z? In other words, kind of saying, you know, there's other people beside you, and it might help you to open your eyes and care about other people a little bit. It might actually help you. You can't say that directly, but if you can get that point, although sometimes you just say it directly anyway, because, you know, you try to say it in a skillful way, they don't hear, and then so some days you just say, yeah. Other comments, questions? Yeah.
This is a little bit different, I think, but you mentioned how we want to gain love from other countries by dropping bombs.
Mm-hmm.
And in lately, there have been horrible atrocities committed in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself really being able to express compassion for the victims, the families, the people that, it was horrible. For me, it was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, at the same time, I was ready to go drop the bomb on the perpetrators,
Mm-hmm.
which is not like how I view myself, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you could talk about how do we open our hearts, how do we develop compassion? What are the words for when there really is injustice, when there really... Because compassion can't just be for the person who needs to have that person. I feel like we need to have compassion also for the people that are committing the acts of atrocity.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you could comment on
Okay,
that.
so your question is, how do we develop compassion also for the perpetrators of harm and perpetrators of atrocity?
Absolutely, because dropping the bomb isn't going to open their heart.
Right. Yeah, dropping the bomb won't open their hearts. So how can we have compassion for them? And at the same time, how can we say that behavior is not acceptable?
Yeah.
Okay? When we look at people committing these kind of atrocities, you know, and I think everybody's been rather shocked by ISIS. Yeah, I mean, I know I have been. And shocked by that. And then I sit and I think, what is going on in somebody's mind that they can do that and harm another human being in that kind of way and still sleep at night? Yeah? It's like, do you have an answer for that?
Well, I think that when it comes to ISIS and the atrocities that's going on over in Iraq and Syria, and maybe soon to be Turkey, I kind of can only blame, I love my country, but I kind of blame our government that's in power today that didn't listen to their advisors or the generals on the ground. And I believe that our government had a direct link in allowing that to happen. And I am more upset with Obama and his regime for allowing that to happen. And because it was when, you know, we pulled our troops out of there, is when it started happening. And even though our government had ample enough warning that these things were going to take place, and it seems like no one's taking responsibility or accountability for that.
So she's asking, how do you feel compassion for ISIS? And you're asking, how do you feel compassion for the people in power in our country?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're all looking for a way to feel compassion for people whose behavior we do not agree with.
Right. Because
yeah.
we all know as a civilized nation that those people over there who have a different way of thinking are, it's barbaric, but at the same time, as a civilized nation, I don't see how we allow that to happen.
Yeah. So let me come back, not so much to the political discussion, but more to the discussion of how do we have compassion for either ISIS or for the people in the U.S. government or for whoever it is who we don't agree with. Yeah. And this is where I sometimes think, if I grew up in the situation that that person grew up in, conditioned by the kind of things they were conditioned by, I might very well think like them and act like them. Yeah, because people are very much products of their environment. I have a hard time understanding how somebody could come to the conclusion that beheading people is going to be the cause of happiness. I have a difficulty with that one. But what it does make me think is somebody is in an incredible state of suffering so that their mind thinks like that. Yeah. So whether you think about, whoever it is you don't agree with, yeah, and just think, if I had grown up like them, I might think like them. And what kind of state of suffering are they in that they're doing what they're doing, and what kind of ignorance lies behind their decisions. Yeah, because there's a lot of ignorance going on. Yeah. And I also have to ask myself, if I were in that situation, would I be free of ignorance? Would I know the right thing to do? You know? I mean, I don't want to be a politician. Yeah? Because I don't think that I would have the skills to deal with many of those situations. But to see, yeah, the deep, deep ignorance that people have when they think that harming others is the way to happiness. Yeah. Does that make some sense? Hmm?
No, it's clear, and I think then it's to put it into the practice, to be able to open the heart,
Yeah.
and to really feel that compassion for that ignorance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one way that helps me, I'm coming from a Buddhist viewpoint here, where we talk about, you know, our actions, meaning karma, having an ethical dimension and leading us to experience certain results in the future. When I think of the results that some of those soldiers are going to experience in future lives because of the actions they're doing now, yeah, it's like, I don't want to wish them harm. Because it's going to be terrible what they experience. And what you see is just, you know, we talk about cyclic existence and just how confused the whole process is. Yeah, motivated by ignorance and people acting in ways that they think will bring them happiness that actually create the cause for suffering. And then they experience suffering, so then they do more actions that create the cause for more suffering. Yeah, so it's difficult. So, but this is the reason for having the compassion. And to know that suffering is not a given, that suffering arises due to causes, and that all these kinds of causes can be eliminated. So it's not just a thing of developing compassion and then sitting there in this stew of like, everything is so awful and there's no hope. But seeing that, you know, all the suffering is rooted in ignorance, and that ignorance is something that can be eliminated because it misapprehends reality. So when we're able to develop the wisdom that understands things as they are, that wisdom sees the opposite of what ignorance sees. And it has the power to overwhelm the ignorance and stop the ignorance. So it's helpful to think that although beings may be, you know, completely under the thumb of ignorance right now, it doesn't have to be that way. That there is a way to develop the wisdom that can abandon and eliminate the ignorance forever. And then you have an optimistic view, and you know it's going to take a long time, so you're not impatient about the whole thing, but you do keep steadily working in that direction. Yes?
I find it's easier for me to achieve that in smaller circles instead of projecting the world's ignorance. I like to just try to control my immediate surroundings and
Yeah.
focus on my own happiness,
Okay.
that around me.
Okay, so you're saying it's easier to work with a smaller group of people, especially those around you, and wishing them well,
Yeah.
and not getting too involved with the bigger world, because it can be overwhelming. Yeah. So I think we always start with the people around us, but you know, we live in the world and there's no way we can shut ourselves off from it. Yeah, we always exist in relationship to every living being, anyway, whether we like it or not. Yeah. So it's good to try and broaden the perspective of our compassion. Okay, first her and then you.
So, as I think about this global, we're global, and yes, we can understand that these people grew up in ignorance and they're violent. Don't we have a social responsibility if we can't change that? If we sit there and we watch, we can have compassion and understand both sides.
Mm-hmm.
But where is our social responsibility with that compassion if we're sitting there watching people just being slaughtered?
Okay. So then the question is not only how to have compassion as a mental thing, but what do we do? How do we engage? Yeah? And this is not so easy to figure out, to tell you the truth.
Do you sit there and let them continue to do their atrocities and say, oh, we have compassion? Or is
Yeah.
it compassionate to take action so we
Yeah.
need to stop?
No, when we have the ability to intervene and stop harm, we should definitely intervene and stop the harm. Okay? The question is what is a skillful way to intervene so that we don't incite more harm by attempting to stop this, we're attempting to stop this harm, but it gets more people riled up who create more harm. And that's why it's difficult to know what to do in these very complicated situations. Because there is not one easy, simple way that is headache-free. Yeah? It's very difficult. So I think that's where we need to use as much wisdom as we can and think, deeply, how can I I want to intervene. What is a skillful way to do it that would stop the harm and not start new harm? And so, like I said, there's no one easy way that is going to stop a problem quickly. And that's what we're all looking for, and I think that's why we get so frustrated and why we blame others, because we just would like to say, if we only did this one simple thing, then we could control the whole situation and make it all go away. But we're dealing with sentient beings whose minds are overwhelmed by ignorance, anger, and attachment. There's not going to be some quick, easy solution to get everybody to calm down and live together peacefully. Yeah. And we can see that when we even try and solve our own problems. Yeah, because sometimes it happens, we get into conflicts with somebody. And we hold on to our position so strong. And even though we say, there's no I don't need to be so angry, we hold on to our anger. I mean, we can see how difficult it is sometimes even dealing with our own mind, let alone trying to think of a quick, easy way to deal with other people's minds who we don't understand. Okay? So it's, this mind that wants to find the one quick, cheap, easy thing to do you know, and attribute the problem to one person or one cause, that mind is really rather narrow.
Well, how do you, who have children, wake up not angry at the, you know, the situation that's going on in the world? You know, thinking about their future. And I'm 44, so I grew up in a time when, before I went to war and everything, I grew up in a time where it was peaceful. You should be able to leave the door unlocked and, you know, kids stay out until after midnight. Nowadays, there's no way I allow my little girl to grow up in a world that seems to be insecure, unsecured. Things that are going on close to our porous borders, in Mexico, and mass graves. I mean, that's uncivilized. And we got that stuff in our backyard. Then you have, you know, these terrorist threats, ISIS, got Americans going over there. So every time I look at my little girl, I'm angry about the situation in the world.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, so you're saying that you want to protect your daughter and you love her and you don't want her to grow up in an unsafe world, and yet you can't control all the things around her. You know, I was watching, if you have a chance, I only watched half of it today. You know, it was on the New York Times website. It was a video made in '09 by somebody. This was before Malala was shot, but it was about the situation in SWAT, and her father had a school for girls, and the Taliban came and said, you have to shut down the school by such and such a date or else, you know. And I was so impressed by the way her father spoke. You know, he clearly, you know, at the beginning of the video, he was saying, I looked at her eyes when she was a baby and I just fell in love with my daughter. You know, I mean, you could just see the love he has for her daughter. She was 11 years old at the time. But he was bringing her up to understand this situation and to be strong in the situation. And at one point, she was saying, I want to be a doctor, but my dad wants me to be a politician. And I don't want to be a politician. And Dad says at that point, you know, she can do so many things better than be a doctor. And I found that so interesting because in our society, doctor is like, you know, prestige, money, power, blah, blah, blah. And Father is saying she can do better than being a doctor because my child can help influence the world to be a better place. And he was bringing up his child in this situation with the Taliban in the village, shutting down his school, you know, bringing up his child to have this thought of, I can do something worthwhile for the world. And I was just going, wow. You know, I was so impressed with the kind of faith that he had in his daughter. I mean, clearly, you know, like you, he doesn't want his child to suffer. But he was like saying, you can do something about it. And was encouraging her to be strong and to speak out, you know? And I don't know if her father is still alive. Does anybody know? Or did the Taliban kill him? I don't know, but I thought he, if he's alive, must be beside himself, seeing that she got the Nobel Peace Prize and seeing the good that she's done in this world. She hasn't been able to stop everything. She hasn't been able to make sure all the girls get education. But she has brought that issue to the forefront of many people's minds. Yeah. And I think especially for little girls, so that they can really, even in this country, you know, where they can have equal opportunity and equal education. I mean, what she's done and what her father has encouraged her to do is just amazing to me. You know? So maybe your little girl.
Oh, I teach her well. I mean, she can hardly talk, but I talk to her every day.
Yeah. No, you can tell she's a bright child. I was watching her. She was taking everything in, you know, really paying attention. Yeah.
I think that the word ignorance, if you parse that word, and you tear it apart, come to ignore. And if you come to ignore, and you realize that you have, if you ignore situations, whether they're in your neighborhood or in the world, if you ignore those situations, they usually get worse. If you do not ignore them, then the only thing you can do is to pay attention to them. If you pay attention to that situation, then you either react with anger or worsen it, or you act with compassion or lessen it. And if you act with compassion, you usually think about it quite a while, and then you figure out a way to approach the person who's an adversary and try to make them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. I might add on to that. I've discovered sometimes in some situations it's better to ignore, because somebody is spinning out over something that is very small, and if I pay attention to it, it feeds a small problem and makes it bigger. Whereas if I just let that person say what they have to say and don't feed it, then it goes. Yeah. So sometimes it depends on the situation. Okay, let's sit quietly for a couple of minutes. In some situations, exactly, you can have compassion, and with compassion, not feed a situation. Okay. So let's just sit quietly for a minute or two and think about what you've heard, so that you can remember it and take it home with you. And let's rejoice at the good energy that we created together as individuals and as a group, just by putting our minds in a good direction, thinking about compassion, thinking about how to help, searching for answers to important questions. So all of that creates a lot of goodness, a lot of good energy, even though the questions are difficult ones. So let's rejoice at what we've done. And you can feel all of that good energy. Think of it as a ball of light in the center of your chest. So all your compassion, all the good energy that everybody here created, so this ball of light in the center of your chest. And then let that light radiate out. So that it fills your body, fills the room, and as the light keeps expanding, it touches all of the other living beings. And we think that we're giving our goodness, our positive energy, away to all these living beings, dedicating it for their welfare, for their benefit. And think of this light going out and touching people who are suffering from anger, people from illness, people from war, and so on. And then think, may I and all these living beings be well. May we be happy. May we be able to tap into our great human potential and our inner goodness and share that with everyone in the world. Okay. And just one more comment. Many years ago, His Holiness Dalai Lama was in Seattle, and he scolded the media. Well, he praised the media and he scolded them. He said, you guys do a lot of good. With your nose, you find out things that shouldn't be happening and expose them. It was so cute the way he did it, kind of like Pinocchio, you know. And you stick your nose in the sea and expose things that need to be brought to light. That's very good. But you also speak too much about the negative and not enough about the positive. And he said, how many people in this city were helped by other people today? Yeah, it's like everybody's been helped by other people today. But what goes on the front page? The harm. So he said the media is skewing things. We're not talking about the goodness and the help and emphasizing it and paying attention to it. Yeah. We're putting our energy too much on the harmful aspects. And I think we get manipulated in that way. Yeah. So I think part of having courageous compassion is being able to stay focused on the good in the world and the good in other living beings. Yeah. Stay focused on it, encourage it, point it out, speak about it, develop it in ourselves, share it with others.